and good morning, everybody. My name is Vicki Hale. I'm a project manager serving at UAGC. I am the proud host of this session, the first step initiating a conversation on credit for prior learning and belonging research. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with the TLC related materials. Microphones are intentionally muted for this presentation, but we strongly encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled the live transcription. If you'd like to use it, click the show caption buttons at the bottom of your Zoom window and it'll pop up for you. And now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to the lovely and talented Alexa Dunn, who is the Associate Director of Articulation and Prior Learning Assessment at UAGC. Take it away, Alexa.
Thank you so much, Vicki, and good morning and welcome everyone to our session, the first step, initiating a conversation on credit for prior learning and belonging research. As Vicki mentioned, my name is Alexa, so I will be guiding the conversation today. Joining me today, I have, unfortunately, I have two of my phenomenal peers. Unfortunately, Susan had some travel issues happen today, so she is unable to join. But I do have, and please welcome with me, Matt from the University of Louisville and Melissa from the Community College of Vermont. I'm extremely excited and grateful that you're here to talk with us today about this subject. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. So our session today has three small but broad learning objectives. The first is to review the data available on credit for prior learning, or CPL, and completion rates. The second is to explore and identify gaps in knowledge on how and why CPL positively affects completion rates, specifically in relation to belonging. And the third is to brainstorm research opportunities exploring the relationship between CPL and belonging. We hope that those of you here today are willing and able to join in the brainstorming section. You will be able to raise your hand and I believe unmute yourself once we get there, but also definitely use the chat to participate throughout. Before we do jump in, the very first thing I like to do is to ensure we're all aligned on definitions. So CPL is generally defined as credit awarded for college-level learning gains outside of a traditional higher education classroom. There are several common things accepted by institutions, such as national testing programs, ACC and NCCRS credit recommendations. The military uses ACE, certain professional certifications, and then possibly work and life experience. The key point is that college-level learning has occurred. Every institution does have their own policies and procedures around CPL. So if you're interested in your institution's policies, please connect with your advising or transfer team. Then I also would like to just quickly broadly define belonging. So belongingness, per dictionary.com, is the quality or state of being an essential or important part of something. We all want our students to feel important and valued members of our communities. Okay, so jumping into our first learning outcome, in 2020, Witchy and Kale released the PLA Boost, where PLA is synonymous with CPL for today's discussion. And then in 2021, the follow-up report, Equity Paradoxes in the PLA Boost, which disaggregated data from the PLA Boost. What they found is that students who are awarded 15 or more credits for prior learning will complete on average 17.6 more credits than students not awarded any CPL. And they also have a 22 percentage point increase. I forgot to write percentage in my thing. Increase in credential completion rates for those students with those 15 or more CPL credits. In the equity paradox, it delves into the diversity, equity, and inclusion related data and the differences between various student populations. Neither studies reviewed belonging. Now, anecdotally, we all have stories of how CPL at our institutions can help our students. Matt, from your experience, do students at the University of Louisville who receive CPL tend to engage more with campus activities, resources? How do they perceive their place within the university compared to traditional students?
So just like so many of your institutions, our adult students at a very traditional institution are on the fray of the academic exchange because many of our students are taking evening and online classes that are adults. Therefore, they're not as engaged because they're working full time while pursuing a degree. That said, we have found that CPL is a really great boost, just like the PLA boost, in a student's confidence and connectedness to our institution. The acknowledgement and value that we place on these students when we evaluate their learning translates into connectedness and belonging in our program and beyond. And we think that when a person walks in, or we've seen when a person walks in, they are often really committed to no frills, direct information, and only courses that are required of them so they can be very efficient with their time at our institution. Once we engage in our academic program alongside CPL, we see a transformation because they have a higher level of self-efficacy directly linked to what they've been evaluated on and valued through the CPL process. Once their portfolio is done and that class that we do is a 3-credit hour class, it turns into academic credit that really spirals them forward with really positive momentum, and also is a direct corollary to higher levels of retention at our institution.
I love that concept of self-efficacy. It was highlighted in the opening session as one of the keys to belonging. It's fantastic. Melissa, in your experience at the Community College of Vermont, what role does CPL play in helping adult learners feel integrated into your academic community? And how can institutions enhance that sense of belonging?
Great. Thank you, Alexa. Here at Community College of Vermont, or you might hear me call it CCV, we offer a variety of options for students to get college credit for what they already know. Our most popular option, as Matt just alluded to as well, is our portfolio course, where students are guided through the process of describing and documenting their prior learning for a college credit award. One of my great honors is to play the role of quality control in the faculty evaluation of those portfolios by facilitating the evaluation process. In that process, I read and research each of the portfolios that are submitted. These portfolios also include a narrative essay, so I hear from students time and again that they felt something was missing for a number of years, or that something in their life was incomplete. Well, many of the students write that they benefited from the journey to arrive where they are today, or that they're right where they're supposed to be. The credit they are awarded is key to recognition and validation of their life's work outside of a college classroom. That key, which goes with the theme, while not unlocking all doors, it does let them kind of enter and access the waiting room. And it allows them back into, or to gain access for the first time to higher education without starting at the ground floor. So PLA or CPL zips them right up using the elevator. Institutions can enhance this sense of belonging by awarding those equivalent credits in whatever ways that they can, by recognizing credits both in the field of study and general education requirements, and not just giving students electives for these types of evaluations. Not only does the award of prior learning credit boost a student's confidence, but it gets them that much closer to their goals, so they're more likely to be retained.
I love it. On a sort of personal, maybe selfish level, one of my absolute favorite things is when we're working with one student who truly didn't think they had something, but they were encouraged to submit something to us, and then they get credit. And just the effusive sort of the way they grow, right? They grow with that confidence. Watching that with people is probably one of all of our favorite parts of our jobs, to see that with them. All right, so let's look at the gaps in the knowledge and how we can begin to fill them. The Equity Paradoxes report explores key identifiers related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as socioeconomic status, race, and ethnicity, and other data that institutions of higher ed do collect for reporting to the Department of Education. The data was collected in 2019. Belonging and research into it seems to be a newer category, and as such is not specifically studied within this report. However, we know that belonging is related to DEI, so can hypothesize certain things. Additionally, this report was based on quantitative data from 72 institutions. What else is missing? Do we have the student voice? Have we asked them why did they finish more courses? Have we asked why they finished their credential at the institution? While this discussion is related to belonging with the theme of TLC, what other key areas could and should be studied? For example, I have heard accessibility and justice included with DEI and belonging. Melissa, what gaps in our knowledge do you see, and how can we begin to fill them?
Sure. So one thing that I should point out is that Community College of Vermont was one of the 72 institutions included in the PLA boost in that study. While we were not selected for the qualitative interviews, there were 4 institutions that had a couple of their students interviewed as part of the study. So there were 6 students who gave narrative interviews as well. I think that asking students is the right idea, but I'm not sure how practical that is. And I think the timing is likely really important. Students need to be at a place in their journey where they can critically reflect, but not too far along in the process that they've forgotten what it means to feel like an outsider. I will mention CAEL released, CAEL, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, released a white paper last week on the multiple meanings of college. That might be a new source for some of this information. I went to a session at a conference last week where they presented on this new study, which included in-depth interviews with 120 students. And they cited the following motivating factors in addition to the standard responses of they're going through higher ed and prior learning to get a better job or increase their wages. So the additional factors that they were finding in that qualitative data was that students do it to be a good role model, usually for a family member, that they do it to counteract racism, so to kind of bring themselves up to a different level so that they're viewed as equals. They do it to serve others, to give back to the communities they've come from. They do it to have a sense of achievement that they've accomplished something. And the last thing that they found was that it helps to foster personal growth. The study found that adult learners combine both that economic motivator along with the non-economic motivator. So I'm looking forward to seeing more data like that, because qualitative data, it's hard work, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of funding. So more studies like this will be really helpful. And CAEL mentioned that this is just the first brief coming out of this study, and they said stay tuned for more information. So I'm excited to see what else they've learned from these 120 students. And it sounds like they're also open to getting some feedback on what other information practitioners like us who work in this prior learning assessment CPL space, what we need to hear to help us really serve these students.
I will be looking for that paper. I unfortunately didn't get to CAEL this year, but I know that they always come out with, we're using 2 of their studies already in this presentation, so that's going to be very interesting. Pivoting, Matt, how do our assessment philosophies, including policies, practices, and procedures, impact the student's sense of belonging? How might they support, undermine, or otherwise influence it?
Well, there's certainly a great deal of variability in the way that CPL is rolled out at a variety of institutions. And I think that to establish and secure additional sense of belonging, it is so essential that you have very standard policy and practice and operating procedures by which you do the evaluation. And I think we're lucky to have these panelists. Melissa is out on the front end of this, you as well, Alexa. And we work with a group called the Prior Learning Assessment Network, which is kind of a national group of free, open source sharing about best practices in CPL, where we really promote some of the things that are happening all over the country in CPL so that we can borrow from one another and adapt and also try and standardize. And I think that is the next step in our evolution with CPL to create that sense of belonging, because without consistent policy and practice, it's hard to really get the kind of momentum We were also part of the 72 institution study at the University of Louisville and had some qualitative content added as well from our students. So that was an absolute pleasure to see that come to fruition 10 years later after fueling the race research. And then Becky Klein-Collins is, just an outstanding researcher that puts so much great quality content out there from Kale, as well as our friend and colleague, Anand Travers. These are the folks that we want to lean on as we kind of move forward and try to do additional qualitative work to really have that driven by and undergirded by the research that they've done. So back to my meandering comment, we just got to get more consistent. And it just boils down to finding ways to communicate more and more across universities without competition. So we can have institutional neutrality and just share open source all of our practices so that we can arrive at a really high quality set of policy and practice that really connects well with our learners that are very non-homogenous. I mean, these folks range from 20 something to 70, 80 and beyond. So we know that these people have different experiences and knowledge, and we need to tailor our approaches to a wide breadth of people that we serve.
This idea of having sort of an industry standard, a way that we can all evaluate similarly, or at least report out similarly. We at UAGC are pursuing more of the reporting that was in the PLA boost. We were not one of the institutions, but we're going down that path of pulling that out. We think it's phenomenal data. I wanted to speak just a moment. So unfortunately, Susan is not able to be with us, but I was able to connect with her in the planning stages of this presentation. And I had a few things that she had said that really stuck with me. And they kind of, similar to how you're talking about the policies and procedures and making sure that they're equitable across everything. One of the things that she is doing is she's pursuing reporting at Thompson Rivers University and within British Columbia, I believe, as a whole, but please don't quote me on that part. And she was talking about how belonging actually is different in the cultural context. So for example, in British Columbia, there is a large Indigenous population, and at Thompson Rivers as well. So she was talking about how they had to sort of go back to the drawing board and think about that, where also the way we do our assessments may exclude people. So in certain cultures or populations, the learning and assessment is done through just your common talking, interaction, working on the job. And so UAGC, we're fully online. Our assessments all have a written component that may not be inclusive for our students. So having that sort of idea of given to me through this conversation of, do we need to take a step back and look at those policies as being possibly exclusive or exclusionary, I should say, I believe. What can we do to broaden our acceptance and our understanding of what people are arriving with? The PLA network, which you mentioned, we're all members of, that's one of those places my team and I go, and we come out every month with new ideas from the attendees. It's definitely one of those fantastic places. And Kale, Becky Klein-Collins, we would love to be able to connect with her on some of those things as well. Okay.
If I could interject on that front, I think one frame that we might be able to use as we are trying to create greater inclusivity and accommodation for learners that may feel othered in some way is our K-12 system. We have IEPs, or individual education plans, for learners that are neurodivergent and have any other disabilities. Similarly, we do that for our traditional undergrads. We need to consider those things as we adapt and we create this consistency while we look at IEPs, while we look at disability resources and different cultural competence in that process. And I think if we do that, we kind of reflect what we've done from K-12 to our traditional population and now to this really underserved population of adults.
my brain is still processing all of that with like so many ideas coming out of it, right? Like we should have supportive education that works for everyone from K through post-secondary. It's not going down that rabbit hole. I could get completely off track when we see a rabbit hole. Okay, let's jump ahead to this is our next slide. The third learning outcome was to brainstorm the research opportunity. So we obviously have some gaps in our knowledge. Let's talk about how we might go forwards in researching and filling in the gaps. We've touched on a few pieces already. The National Institute of Health, or NIH, has a general belonging scale and survey guidelines. And would we be able to leverage that resource to measure belonging due to CPL? How do we accurately attribute any increase in belonging to CPL versus factors occurring simultaneously? If we know CPL helps, do we really need to know why? What would we actually use any data that arises from a CPL and belonging study for? Matt, what are your thoughts on measuring belonging, possibly leveraging the NIH GBS or other theories out there that we could potentially borrow from to enhance our understanding?
So just borrowing from all those scholars that have taught me along the way, I think we've got to have a theoretical underpinning for any research that we conduct. And the idea of the GBS being incorporated in this research is a new wrinkle and is incredibly exciting. I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps, and I know you do too, Melissa and Alexa as well. Every time we think about this, peeling back layers of really understanding what is happening in the process alongside empowering them with direct, quantifiable credits that's going to accelerate their path. Those two measures, if we look at them, we obviously know we have empirical proof that the numbers, when acknowledged or credit, are creating greater levels of persistence, faster pace to graduation, and actually net positive revenue for institutions because of that retention, that 17.6 additional credits taken. Now, let's get under the hood and go forward and look at what that means for them kind of mentally, emotionally, because just like what we saw from the front end about some of the reasons people returned, that Kale study really reflects some that I've done as well. And it says the number one ranking reason oftentimes is not workplace advancement. It is neck and neck sometimes, but it is also that personal fulfillment. There's an emotional component of one trying to advance their family and inspire the next generation of learners by walking the walk and going through education. So if we get under the hood and look at some of that emotion alongside the quantifiable evidence that CPL makes a difference, I think that truly takes this field of study to the next level. And I'm really grateful to Alexa. I got to push you out front and give you the shout out because she had this idea and connected with us via the Prior Learning Assessment Network. And I think these are the initial stages of us moving this forward and trying to get it out into the literature.
Thank you. I'm going to turn bright red. If you can't see it, just know it did happen. I love this idea of what actually helps them move forwards. I think a lot of the times we have this carrot and a stick kind of idea of motivation, that promotion or that raise or that new job or that something external is going to push us forwards, where a lot of the times we have that intrinsic motivation, that intrinsic need that we have to fill. And if that isn't being met, if that isn't being supported, if that isn't being elevated, the external actually becomes demotivating at a certain point. There's a point, for example, if you work in a sales position and every month you get to a point where like, I've made enough, I don't need to make any more this month. And then you plateau at that. There's that empirical evidence on that sort of idea as well. So to hear how interconnected belonging is with those things, we hear people say, my very first graduation ceremony I attended as an employee of this university, this 70-something-year-old gentleman came in and said, well, I'd always promised myself I'd get it, but I thought my time had passed until I heard about this online university. His wife was just beaming, and it's never too late, right? That was such a thing to me to realize how impactful online education was, but also other opportunities for people, and that intrinsic motivation tying with the belonging and recognizing he had had some previous college credits, so we were able to give him those in transfer. I kind of went down a little rabbit hole again. This is what my team does, and this is what we do at Plan. It's always so fantastic to come out of these conversations with so many more ideas and such a hopefulness for moving forwards, just as you were saying, Matt. Melissa, my question for you is, how do we ensure that students and alumni's voices are included in this research? You'd started talking about qualitative data and the challenges with it, so I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, so I think it's important that we continue to gather this information on a national scale and to make sure that it represents voices from multiple institutions and regions, because we need prior learning assessment, CPL, to be accepted in the widest circles. So bodies like CAEL and WICHE, and the new study that's coming out from CAEL was a partnership between Stanford Pathways Network and Strada Education Foundation. Institutions like that are really in great positions to conduct this type of research. And what I think when we kind of cast the net wide and get lots of voices represented, I think that we see, or I expect to see, a surprising amount of overlap, because I think, because I think even though there are lots of differences with the students, I mean, the 20-year-olds versus the 70-year-olds, but there are many qualities that they bring with them that are the same. So I think we'll start to see some similarities there. I think then, only then, when we've heard lots of voices, that CPL becomes more widely accepted and offered at institutions. And then I think we have to then focus on that next hurdle, or those next hurdles. We already know that CPL moves the needle on enrollment, retention, completion. Now, how do we systematically ensure that that recognized learning is portable, travels with the students, and it goes with them beyond their community, beyond their state, beyond their regional boundaries? Because we know our adult students are on the move. They are making choices for their family and themselves, and those credits need to go with them. And I think that's really important as kind of the next place that we go with this, is to figure out, okay, now that we have institutions that are doing this well, doing this with policies and systems, now how do we help them take it with them to whatever that next step is? So that's the next hurdle.
It feels like a lot. I think breaking it down into smaller pieces, as we're trying to do by focusing on belonging here, is one way forwards, and it can allow us to do it in a more of a test and learn sort of hypothesis, control group, and single change kind of test. So now we're getting to, we'll continue to talk as well, but we'd love to hear more from our audience. To open the floor to questions and comments, if you would like to speak, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, put stuff into the chat for us. We've listed a few ideas here. What is your institution currently doing to gather CPL and belonging data? Is anyone from an institution that is gathering that? When I think about, let's start with the first one here, obtaining the industry standard baseline. I think that is where we need to sort of look, and we need to reach out to those partners like CAEL. We had sort of spoken with Becky a little bit prior. She obviously was running the conference last week for CAEL. So what do we think are our next steps? Let's say the three of us are together. Maybe Susan is able to join us too. What are our next steps? What would we do? We do have one question in the chat from Joanna. What are other aspects that can be measured within research along with belonging? Shigita did have a few ideas: level of motivation, perceived support, connectedness to one's institution. Matt, Melissa, would either of you like to
Yeah,
maybe?
I think those are great variables to consider alongside belonging. And I've worked with some colleagues, and we did a study on adult student persistence and looked at all the variables that had been reported in the research as predictive of a person's ability to persist to graduation. And it ranged from three particular constructs, including kind of your standard background characteristics, age, number of children, those types of things, educational goal, and then went into external environmental factors like people's finances, which are far and away so important for people's decision-making processes, alongside other influences within the community, and they're connected with work. And then, of course, our internal campus environmental variables, which we can likely impact. And that's where we look at these things like motivation and some of these emotional factors that might impact the person's ability to make it to and through. But there's a lot of interplay in these variables, because one thing may or may not immediately remove you from the academic enterprise, but a series of events is often the time that people make this decision to stop out. So what we do in this research, when we do extend and we see that belonging is growing, we have a mitigating factor in leaving the educational trajectory to graduation. So if we can do that research, if we can use the theoretical underpinning and start to do some qualitative work to identify that this is or is not statistically significant, then we will truly understand this at a greater clip. All that said, it is so important that we have more qualitative research in CPL, because we don't have a lot. CPL has been a collective of quantitative studies that have been growing over the years. And I have said to Melissa and Alexa as well, that when I think of online learning 10 years ago, I might have not had as a favorable of an opinion about online learning. But today, online learning is widely accepted. We're doing it everywhere. We're doing it University of Arizona Global Campus and many other large scale institutions, and also our Ivy Leagues. So it's widely accepted. I think we're going to have a dramatic acceleration of that acceptance in CPL, partly because of demographic factors. We have a new seat at the table with our institutional mission, where adults are now a part of, an integral part of many traditional campuses, and their path to maintain at least static level of enrollment. So this is our time to really accelerate that work and make sure that there are more and more empirical studies. So I'm saying this to the folks that are on this webinar, as well as those that you are connected to. If you know scholars that are looking for work, this is something we would love to connect with you with and really advance this. We need some great scholars to help us make these things come to fruition.
I love that. And I know the Hoover app allows people to connect with us and send messages there. So definitely feel free. I'm going to speak for Melissa as well as myself and echo Matt. We're always open to the ideas and to hearing from others. So I love that this idea of access, equity, social inclusion, all of these things come together. I was just thinking as you were speaking about how we used to call adult learners non-traditional, and that absolutely doesn't fit, because if I remember correctly, I'd have to go and look up the actual statistics. They're now such a huge part of the total college students. You can't think that they're non-traditional, this little piece over there, right? They're actually a huge part of our way forward as an industry of serving all education seekers. Dr. Charlie has a comment in here. He's talking about we need to continue to work with faculty to reinforce the importance that there are different ways that students can demonstrate competency of a subject matter other than being in the traditional or online classrooms. So different avenues to learn, different avenues to award credit are needed. This kind of harkens back to my conversation with Susan on different cultures have different ways of proving it, different subjects specifically. One of the things that we wish to do in the coming year is really look at the offerings we have for our UAGC PLA, which is anything that doesn't hold ACE or NCCRS credit. We realized that, for example, a coding course, I could write an essay on coding to the learning outcomes of the course. I probably would not be able to code a program that would get me the same grade if the test was on a coding task. So another one that I believe it might have been Charlie, but it might have been someone else I was speaking with, was talking about accounting. I could also talk about general theories of accounting. I struggle a little more doing a ledger card. I did it. I got through them in my MBA. I can do them, but they're more difficult for me. So in an account, when you're trying to do an accounting thing, maybe that's another one where we need a different type of assessment. And I think to tie it back to the belonging thing is that it's recognizing that the skill that they have is writing a program for the computer and acknowledging that piece. It is, now we're an online school, but for example, if you're going to make a souffle, again, an essay isn't the way to do it. Getting someone in the kitchen and working through it with them and they make a souffle, that type of competency evaluation is also very apt and can lead to that acknowledgement of, hey, this is how you and your culture, and those are probably not the right examples, but it's that same idea of the culture has a different way of showing the competency. So let's explore what those are for the student and meet that student where they are. Okay. So one of the last questions I had written down in case we didn't get a huge number in the chat was, how does CPL engage discursively with identity, and how does that impact belonging? I feel like that kind of goes on with this theme. I don't know, Melissa, if you have thoughts. We give you equal time.
I mean, so it kind of comes back to what I see in the narrative essays that I see in portfolios, where students carry a lot of baggage with them about not completing a degree when it was socially, culturally acceptable in their life. So I just see a lot of students who carry that with them, and it doesn't stop them from really being very successful. Many of the students that I see coming in have found success outside of a college classroom, but it's always something that sits there and kind of haunts them and really sticks with them. And so I think it's very much tied up to their identity. They don't let it stop them, but it's always there. And it's kind of like, I wish I'd written this down. I had a student who talked about it like a backpack. And that idea stayed with me, that they were carrying this backpack with them, this extra baggage that other employees in their spheres in the workplace didn't necessarily have, that where they always had kind of the imposter syndrome. And again, it doesn't stop them from being successful, but it always feels like something left undone. And so I just think continuing to evolve the ways that we allow them to demonstrate their learning is important. There are things that we do that we should stop doing if they're not serving students anymore. We need to keep listening to their voices. We need to remember that there's a reason why college failed some of these students the first time, and think about how we make it a better fit for them now. So I think those are a couple of things that kind of about identity, belonging, and kind of how we continue to to keep working on this. We can never like pack this away and say we're done. It's a work in progress. And it's important to keep chipping away at it.
Yeah, and Melissa, I think you make such a wonderful point about the backpack and some of the baggage that they carry into our offices and how we are trying to create belonging, but we have to first help them unpack and understand through kind of an appreciative inquiry mindset that they bring so much to our college campuses, that they have so much value, that they have developed so much expertise that translates well onto our programs. As Dr. Minnick was just talking about in the chat, this process is both financially and academically sound. And it's a big win-win. And I think it's a triple win because when you think about the savings that a student might have by using their employer to connect, the employer saves with tuition assistance because the university is connecting with them and acknowledging and valuing some of the training that they have granted. And we translate that into academic credit. And then finally, the institutions win because they have a new population of learners that weren't originally connecting with our institutions. They're on the sidelines and now they're back in the game. So whatever we can do to get them back in the game and really connect with our external partners is truly, in my estimation, a triple win.
I love it. I've called it a win-win-win. The students save time and money. The faculty get to teach more courses that students were not going to take if they didn't get the CPL. And then the university wins from all of those other factors, including the student completing, but the additional revenue and everything that goes along with it. I love, love, love this idea of unpacking. I actually follow a YouTuber and she constantly says, what do I know? I'm not smart. I don't have an education. And there's so much that this person knows and can talk about. And I feel like we can do that with CPL in terms of having a packet. Yes, employees do also win. So we need 4 wins in that little thing to go along. We need to come up with a way of the example, and I've had this from a few people, but Susan talked about it. I want to say Nan Travis might have done something of this. There was definitely a few that I have. SUNY. Nan is SUNY? Okay, I think it was Nan. But having a self-assessment sort of packet or workbook or some way of students saying, these are all the things I've done in my life, and these are all the competencies that go along with it. And that includes things like, I took care of my invalid parent for 3 years in home to save costs on healthcare. Well, you've learned quite a bit about our healthcare system just by nature of doing that, right? What were the competencies at that job where you did filing and emailing and all of these things? What did you learn there? That is something that we need to help people have so that they can then see the learning that they have actually got. And then to then translate it into college credit, it does give them that little bit of validation or a lot of validation potentially, and welcomes them in. And hopefully that does translate, and anecdotally it does translate to them saying, wow, this person gets me, they value me, or this institution values me, they appreciate me, they've given me these credits. Well, as always, these conversations are so fantastic. I'm so appreciative, of both of your times today. Again, we apologize. Susan wasn't here. Unfortunately, travel happens, like just delays happen. For those who are here, I think there's a chat in a survey in the Whova chat. So we would like you to please complete that if you can. And just on a final note, I want to say thank you all for attending, participating with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of TLC.
Nicely done, gang. And the links that Alexa was mentioning, I popped in the chat for easy reference as well. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.